Senate will come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those in the floor will please rise as we're led in prayer by Pastor Jim Ellis of Calvary Church of the Nazarene in Charleston, West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senior senator from the 5th leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've granted us here, and I pray for what Solomon prayed for, and that was wisdom in order to govern. I pray for this assembly that you give them direction and leading, Lord, as it tells us in your word. If we acknowledge you in all of our ways, you will direct our path. I pray, Lord, for mercy and grace to rest upon this great state. And Lord, I know that we need your grace in these days. And so, Lord, would you bless us today? Would you give us your grace? Would you give us your forgiveness? And we pray as these leaders govern the affairs of this state, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you. Those remain standing as we cite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading the journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, February 6, 2023. The Senate met at 11 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, the
Morgan
chair.
Requests unanimous consent that further reading the journal is dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction to guests. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome the honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guests is the senior senator from the 5th, Grady Franks, Carter Miller, and Gracie Dickerson. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our Doctor of the Day. In the rear of the chamber with us today, we have Dr. Rutman Dezagoose from Marshall University. If you wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Cabell and myself, we are very honored to have seated in the President's Gallery the chaperone for our honorary pages today from the Covenant School in Huntington, their teacher, Mindy Stanley. Please stand and let us welcome you.
Further introductions. Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Brooke and myself, we'd like to welcome Hancock County Clerk Karen Valenti and Michelle Biella. Please join me in welcoming them.
Senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. President. In your South Gallery, we have a delegation from the Raleigh County Commission led by President Dave Tolliver. If you would please stand and the Senate join me in welcoming them.
Senator from Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. In your North Gallery today, I have two good friends of mine from Taylor County. We have our county clerk, Jaron Freeman, and deputy clerk, Bobby Belton. Now, not only do they work in the clerk's office, but these two gentlemen, they coach my daughter in soccer and basketball, and so that makes them extra special to me. So I hope the Senate will give them a very, very warm welcome.
Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, draw your attention, along with the senior senator from 10th District, to the South Gallery. Up here, we have several students from Monroe County Schools, and I'll have them to stand, Mount View Middle School and Peterstown Middle School, along with their chaperones. So please make them feel welcome.
Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm proud to now, on behalf of myself and the senators from the 2nd and 3rd District, we have visitors from Ritchie County here, Commissioner Riggs, Commissioner Ritter, and Sheriff Snodgrass. If they're here, would they please stand as the Senate make them welcome? Also in the North Gallery, have the Circuit Clerk from Wetzel County, Lori McCoy. Lori, will you stand? The Senate make her welcome, please.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. In one of the galleries, and I'm not sure which ones we have in here, but I know they're here, we have Grant Garber and Seth Greenley from Ripley Baptist Temple. If you'd please stand. And we also have Bo Burgess with Jordan Baptist out of Mason County. Please stand, and Senate, please make them welcome.
Senator from Mason.
Of your behalf and the behalf of my senior senator from the 4th, we also have a friend of mine in the gallery who's also the Mason County clerk, Diana Cromley. If she's in the president's gallery, if everybody would please make her feel welcome.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. In addition to the pastor that Senior Senator from the 4th announced, today is 2023 Capitol Connection Day at the Capitol. We have numerous pastors here, including Pastor Eric Davis, wherever you are, Eric, stand, and Pastor Jamie Maddox, and Pastor Seth Greenley. Senate, please join me and make them welcome.
Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning, we have FFA students from Pocahontas County High School are joining us as part of a local food and farm day 2023. Today, farmers, agriculture partners, and those that work in nutrition have gathered to show the strength of the local food and agriculture sector that these students participate in. They're young entrepreneurs. They sell plants, flowers, pumpkins, and etc. They are also dedicated to building a strong local food sector in their community, as demonstrated by all their farm to school work, such as growing all of the plant starts for the program this year. And on behalf of the Senator from Randolph, I'd like to introduce the following students: Michaela Irvin, Kristen Friel, Taylor Friel, Hannah Burks, Jessica Armstrong, Logan Weimer, Travis Lewis, Cammie Warner, and their teacher, Andy Friel. If the Senate would please make them welcome. And from Upshur County, we have Buck Edwards, who is an excellent volunteer for just about everything you want to participate in the county. You'll see him at. He's here today. And also Carol Smith, our Upshur County clerk, and Brian Goday, the Upshur County Circuit Clerk. If they please stand and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of House Bill 3141 relating to practice of dentistry.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources and then on the Committee of Government Organization. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 199 relating to purchase of commodities and services from nonprofit workshops and reports back to committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but with the further recommendation that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received, Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be referred to Finance.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 199 will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 204, increasing salary for teachers with less than 8 years of experience, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Amy and Grady, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 234, clarifying uniform statewide deadline for electronically submitted voter registration applications, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 250, requiring Level 1 permit holders to display student driver on rear of vehicle, and reports back to committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the revised committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 302 relating to Law Enforcement Safety Act and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 484 clarifying terms and offense of human smuggling and reports back a committee substitute for same Senate Bill 490, Patrol Officer Cassie Marie Johnson Memorial Act, and reports back a committee substitute for same. And Senate Bill 515, clarifying deadline to file annual report for companies authorized to do business in West Virginia, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the 3 committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 485, PFAS Protection Act, and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Bill Hamilton, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Military has had under consideration Senate Bill 493, exempting West Virginia veterans from certain fees and charges at state parks, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Brian W. Weld, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 519, School Personnel Whistleblower Law, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Respectfully submitted, Amy N. Grady, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 529, allowing businesses to register as limited liability limited partnerships, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 532, creating new crime of soliciting minor, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. It's so ordered.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 533 relating to limitations on motor vehicle used by nonprofit cooperative recycling associations, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Bill Hamilton, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 2310, provide the Division of Motor Vehicles authority to develop an antique fleet program so that multiple antique motor vehicles may utilize a single registration plate, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 2531, requiring cooperation between the rail company and the Division of Highways when construction or maintenance activities are conducted by the company, and has amended same, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass as amended, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 2602, reestablishing certain specialized school service personnel classifications, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Amy N. Grady, Chair.
Report will be received. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 575 through Senate Bill 581 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on our chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bills 575 through Senate Bills 581 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 8 by Senator Woodrum naming the U.S. Army Private II Harold Richard Plumley Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 9 by Senator Maynard declaring Guyandotte River crayfish official crustacean for state of West Virginia.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 26 by Senator Woodrum commemorating and honoring life, military service, and ultimate sacrifice of U.S. Army Sergeant Brian Christopher Karim.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 27 by Senators Nelson, Barrett, Hunt, Jeffries, Phillips, and Stewart designating February 8, 2023 as Crime Victims Day at the Legislature.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 28 by Senator Rucker recognizing essential role court-appointed special advocates provide to West Virginia children.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 7 amending joint rules of Senate and House of Delegates.
Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 7 amending joint rules of Senate and House of Delegates.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Clerk has amendment to the resolution.
Senator Clements moved to amend the resolution by striking out everything after the resolved clause.
Senator from Wetzel.
I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment includes technical cleanup suggested by a parliamentarian. It also adds a provision that clarifies that no naming resolution may be introduced that did not follow the procedures the rule is implementing.
Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Wetzel. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Is there further discussion to the resolution? Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution is the work of a subcommittee that through the interim periods to deal with the problem we have in naming of bridges that create a log jam toward the end of the session. This resolution simply sets a timeline by when things need to be done. The rule is a compromise with the House because we actually wanted it more stringent, but the House would not necessarily agree, so this is a compromise. The resolution changes the joint rules of the House and Senate to limiting naming resolutions to the name of bridges and roads. The deadline for submit naming forms to the Legislative Services and the Division of Highways is December 15th. The Division of Highways then has until January 15th to check on infrastructure availability, location information, and provide that information to Legislative Services. Legislative Services then complete and provide the proposed resolution to the requesting legislator. Naming resolutions would need to follow these procedures and be introduced by the 25th day of the regular session, and naming resolutions could not be considered after 50th day. This process we have today is causing problems toward the end of the session. We think that this will take care of that situation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, urge adoption of the resolution.
Is there further discussion on the resolution as amended? If not, question 4 is the adoption of the resolution as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Senate Resolution 25 designating February 7th, 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Day at the Legislature.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 25 designating February 7th, 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Day at the Legislature.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, when I was at the prosecutor's office, these were oftentimes the most difficult cases that we had to deal with, given the absolute intimate nature of these crimes. It's not like having your debit card stolen or losing your checkbook. These are very intimate crimes dealing with a person's most private spaces. And so I wanted to bring to the body's attention some statistics that are included in the resolution, and that 1 in 5 women nationally will be raped or will be subjected to an attempted rape. Nationally, 44% of women and 25% of men experience sexual violence in their lives. And so, again, similar to yesterday's resolution, today's resolution is to bring light to these awful crimes, but to also bring to light the people in this state that are doing everything that they can to help the victims of these crimes. And that's the West Virginia Foundation for Rape Information and Services. They have rape crisis centers in all 55 of our, in all of our counties. And they've been providing these services for 40 years. And the work that they do goes a long way in helping a victim feel that they have not committed a crime themselves and they haven't done anything wrong themselves, but in fact are the victim of a very violent offense. And so I am proud to present this resolution and urge its adoption. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 50 requiring 1-year residency within district or county to fill vacancy in legislature. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 50 amends a single section of the state code. It's Chapter 3, Article 10, Section 5. And that section deals with vacancies in the state legislature. It addresses what happens when there's a vacancy in an office of delegate or state senator. The bill, if enacted, would make it clear that when there's an appointment to fill a vacancy in a legislative seat, a senator or delegate, that the vacancy must be filled by a person who meets the 1-year residency requirement that exists in the law for a person to be able to run for that office in the first place. In other words, you can't move to the district within a year and then be appointed to fill a vacancy. Be happy to try to answer any questions. Urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 247, making administrative appeals and judicial review of board action subject to provisions of Administrative Procedures Act. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 247 would amend a single section of the state code. It's Chapter 30, Article 1, Section 9. And it clarifies the procedures for appeal of a determination by a licensure board and the procedure for judicial review of those determinations. It strikes a bunch of existing language, but it says that when a person who's been denied a license or registration or against whom adverse disciplinary action is imposed, it preserves the right to appeal, and it makes clear that proceedings in the appeal of the board's action and any further judicial review are subject to the Administrative Procedures Act, which is Chapter 29A of the Code, and the procedural rules adopted for that. This is to clean up, you know, when we passed the Intermediate Appellate Court bill, we channeled all those appeals from administrative agencies to the Intermediate Appellate Court instead of the Circuit Court of Kanawha County. And this is one of those statutes that we overlooked, actually, when we passed the when we passed the Intermediate Appellate Court bill. And the statute, if it's not amended, still contains language suggesting that reviews go to Circuit Court. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 296, Uniform Public Meetings During Emergencies Act. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee Senate Bill 296 creates a whole new article in our state code, and it would be designated as Article 9C of Chapter 6. And it has 10 new sections in it. The bill comes to us through our interim committee on interstate cooperation, and it's legislation that has been recommended to all the states from the Commission on Uniform State Laws, Mr. President. So as we all learned over the past 2 years during the pandemic, there were complexities with having public meetings occur without people being in actual physical attendance. This is suggested relief from the Commission on Uniform State Laws. The West Virginia was able to implement a bunch of these provisions by executive order of the governor during our state of emergency, but this would codify all of it as part of our state law. Just briefly, Section 1 is a short title, Public Meetings During Emergencies Act. Section 2 contains definitions. Section 3 of the bill, and this is all based on, members will remember, we adopted a floor amendment yesterday that was a strike and insert that was offered by the senator from Jefferson. But Section 3 authorizes the holding of virtual meetings during an emergency. Section 4 authorizes virtual meetings and explains, Section 5 explains the conduct of those meetings. Section 6 contains provisions about how the public can observe public meetings that are held during a state of emergency. Section 7 addresses what happens when the public has a right to participate in the meeting that's held virtually during a state of emergency. Section 8 relates to notice. Section 9 authorizes procedural rules. Mr. President, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
The question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 31 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 361, authorizing miscellaneous boards and agencies to promulgate legislative rules. Third reading of the bill.
The question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 361 is our miscellaneous agencies, boards, and commission rules bundle. It contains a total of 48 rules. And rather than go through each one, I know the members have all, the senators have all looked at these. I will say just briefly that this, which is designated as Bundle 9, contains 1 rule from the Board of Accountancy, 3 rules from the Board of Acupuncture, 9 rules from Agriculture. The bundle contains 2 rules from the State Athletic Commission, 1 rule from the Auditor for standards relating to payroll deductions, 2 rules that come from the State Conservation Agency, 1 rule from the Board of Dentistry, 3 rules from the Board of Funeral Services, 1 rule from the Board of Landscape Architecture. Mr. President, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Thank you. The question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Surprised us all. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, 31 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. There's objection. Chair hears none. On this question, 31 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 472, creating criminal offense of indecent exposure in front of minors.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question unanimous consent that the bill over 1 day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 475, modifying examinations for disability pensions. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 475 comes to us at the request of the Municipal Pension Oversight Board. The purpose of the bill is to place a clear definition of what a medical examination is in code regarding the handling of disability awards and benefits that are conducted by the Municipal Pension Oversight Board. Currently, a medical examination is required in code to determine a disability, but the term is undefined in code. This bill provides a new definition in which it explicitly states that an examination by an approved physician of the Municipal Pension Oversight Board may be that this exam may be one in person, it may be virtual, or a medical record review to determine a member's physical or mental health or both. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Mr. President, I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 31 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 295, extending time that prescription for spectacles remains valid. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Woodrum moved to amend the bill on page 2, section 1.
Senator from Summers.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to explain the amendments in lieu of having it read, and that all amendments be considered as one.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. The proposed amendment makes a corrective change to the bill. It also extends the length of time that a prescription for eyeglasses is valid from 3 years to 5 years. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Summers. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 299 relating to crime of trespass generally. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 300 relating to law enforcement training and certification. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 419 establishing standards for licensure of military trained applicants. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 449 updating terms for natural resources police officers, retirement system, and retirement systems for charter schools. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 450 defining medical examination for disability purposes and retirement plans administered by Consolidated Public Retirement Board. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 451 relating to teachers' retirement system and teachers' defined contribution retirement system. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 465 increasing limit on monies placed in county's rainy day fund. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 489 requiring Board of Education provide free feminine hygiene products in certain grades. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 514 clarifying procedure for administrative dissolution of corporations by Secretary of State. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 2800, all relating to authorizing legislative rules regarding higher education. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Committee on Education moved to amend the bill.
Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Mason.
This amendment clarifies that nothing in the Community and Technical College Council's annual reauthorization of degree-granting institutions rule limits any protections afforded to proprietary schools under the code section and rule on correspondence, business, occupation, and trade schools. Mr. President, I urge adoption.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Committee on Education. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading, Senior Senator from 17.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Wow. Miscellaneous business. Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have filed a voting sentiment with the clerk.
The clerk will read the voting sentiment.
Had Senator Hamilton been present in the chamber on Monday, January 30th, he would have voted yea on the passage of the following bills. Senate Bills 51, 239, 241, 243, 248, 251, 258, 270, 271, 282, 283, and 439. Had he been present in the chamber on Tuesday, January 31st, he would have voted yea on the passage of the following bills: Senate Bills 160, 166, 222, 249, 306, 335, 428, 443, 444, 446. Had he been present in the chamber on Wednesday, February 1st, he would have voted yea on the passage of the following bills: Senate Bills 188, 240, and 426, House Bills 2018 and 2029. Had he been present in the chamber on Thursday, February 2nd, he would have voted yea on the passage of Senate Bill 356. Had Senator Hamilton been present in the chamber on Friday, February 3rd, he would have voted yea on the passage of the following bills: Senate Bill 205, 275, 294, 345, 457, and 461, House Bills 2564, 2776, and 2777.
Senator from Upshur.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that my voting sentiment be recorded in the journal as reported.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Bill, and Mr. Speaker, I would urge support.
Chairman, 35th, advance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chair of Health yield to questions, please?
Sure.
Did you say there's only one birthing center in the state right now?
There is. It's on the west side of Charleston, right over here.
Okay. What kind of staffing goes into a birthing center?
It depends on the model that they use. It depends on, I'm sorry, at the hospital or at
the birthing center compared to the hospital. What kind of staffing goes into that?
It could be the same. You could actually have an obstetrician doing deliveries there. You can have a combination of obstetricians and nurse midwives, or you could also have one that's led by all nurse midwives. It would be probably similar to what you would see in a lot of hospitals, because they do allow nurse midwives to deliver inside hospitals as well. So it would be dependent upon, what model was chosen. Okay. I can't speak to the center over here because I believe that they have both OBs and midwives that deliver in the center here in Charleston, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
Okay, so these, just for my clarification, just so I understand, because
yes,
we only have one in the state, and I would probably agree that we probably need more. But my reserve on this, just so maybe you can help me out here, is I'm just an old coal miner, so stay with me here. We're out here in the rural areas of West Virginia. Pretty good distance. I think the closest hospital to my people, probably within 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, somebody comes up and has, say, a pregnancy, goes into labor, and say the baby's breech or something, and there has to be some kind of emergency surgery for C-section or whatever. These birthing centers can handle that, correct?
Nurse midwives are trained in certain maneuvers. If you're talking about specifically to the midwives and OB, if it's staffed with an OB, certainly, and then nurse midwives are also trained in certain techniques of delivery. The other instance you mentioned, if you're an hour and a half away from a hospital and you have that patient presentation, nurse midwives and OBs are excellent assessments at what's higher risk and lower risk, and so they would refer that person out probably before they got into trouble to an appropriate center. And you mentioned your hospital was very far away, so if you have a neonatal delivery that's born and needs a higher level of care, you transfer that patient to a higher level of acuity of care, because like a lot of the smaller hospitals do not have neonatal units. So you're still getting a long transport regardless of who's doing the delivery or whatever happens.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Welcome.
Gentleman to 47th, I got Longenegger's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the Vice Chair of Health yield? Continue to yield, please.
Yes, sir.
Are these birthing centers limited to only the day of the birth?
No, actually, they provide a lot of. They actually do the obstetrical or the prenatal care before the delivery, and they can also do, I believe, up to the 28 days after. A lot of times, nurse midwives, it's in their scope to do 28 days of care for the patient and the baby 28 days after the care. So they also do see the neonates.
So would it be fair to say that these types of centers would actually help a woman progress through her pregnancy and provide the care that that lady would need, for that 9 months prior to birth.
Absolutely, and the other thing I would talk about is gynecological care. Whether it's OB or somebody that is a nurse midwife, they're also trained to do a lot of pap smears and women's health things. So there are other services that the birthing center could potentially offer people in rural areas that do not have those services. So yes, that is true.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll speak to the bill quickly. So we remember the battle we had last summer when this body banned abortions in the state of West Virginia. A lot of folks out in society and a lot of my friends here over in the corner, I love you guys dearly, everybody said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's then have some bills that actually help the women carry the baby and help the women, give them the support they need. So I expect to see lights lighting up green, those of you over here in the corner, because this is what you asked for. This is a good bill. I support it. Thank you.
Chairman 78, Dr. Shkreli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Vice Chairman yield? Vice Chairwoman?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. What would the standard operating procedure be for a birthing center if they were to come upon an emergency which would require a C-section or something like that?
So they have emergency procedures set into place. Birthing centers are usually accredited by an accrediting body, so there are certain standards. You have to have emergency care, and it would be no different than say you had to have transfer from a hospital to a higher level of care. You would have people there that were trained to take care of that emergency and have an emergency operations plan in place to take care of those patients.
So they are well equipped to deal with these situations should they arise?
Yes, and usually any type of accrediting body, that is one of the things before you ever grant accreditation is they make sure that those procedures are in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Nothing for.
From the 85th, Doug Hott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the delegate from the 38th if he would yield for some questions.
From the 38th.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Thank you for yielding. So for the benefit of the body, there's a lot of new members here. Would you state your profession?
One on the legislature legislator, and also I'm an obstetrician.
Okay, thank you. So just as a brief description, and I can't imagine that your days are very consistent, but on a day-to-day basis, what does that involve?
I'm on call every day as far as my obstetrics part. So even here, I have backup in case of emergencies, but that's a 24/7, 365-day year.
So speaking to these birthing centers, how do you envision them being staffed from what we've heard and what we understand about the bill before us?
Well, there are different models that people have used across the country. I mean, you could have nurse midwives that staff it themselves. You could have a group of physicians that want to. You could have a combination of those.
Okay, thank you. So my concern specifically is the rare occurrences, the emergencies, the things that are unpredictable, the emergency C-section, the HELP syndrome, things that don't occur often, but what could happen in a birthing center should one of those emergencies arrive that weren't predictable from your consulting with the patient, but they're there at a birthing center and there's a major complication.
Well, as I mentioned last week when we had a similar bill with the nurse anesthetist part, a lot of emergencies can occur, and it's usually on very low-risk patients or perceived low risk that could turn into emergencies. So that can happen anywhere, whether it's in a hospital, in a tertiary center, or in a birthing center, or at home. So the timing of being able to respond to that would be important. Certainly if they have access to care, particularly in a rural area, you may not be able to transfer that patient, if it's a true emergency at that time, to another center. The current birthing center, I believe, is not too far away from hospitals here, so that's a little easier for them to do that. However, if you get, let's say you have a baby that's stuck, big shoulder dystocia, and the kid's stuck, can't come out, you don't have a lot of time to get that kid out, and that has about a 50% mortality rate for those babies. So sometimes those are, maybe for a lot of women do like to let things happen naturally. They may go to 42 weeks in their pregnancy, greater chance of larger for gestational age babies at that time, so that could be a scenario. Hemorrhage is probably your biggest thing, leading in mortality for women in the state. I'm not a big fan of home births for that reason, because when you get a hemorrhage, you don't have a lot of time to get them anywhere, because you could lose, not necessarily baby, but lose mom. So that is a concern for that. But yes, there are. But if you're talking about low-risk cases, majority of those are going to probably go fine without a big problem. The higher-risk ones should probably be in another center. And then even above my care, as an obstetrician in my hospital, we have a pretty good hospital to deal with stuff. You have maternal fetal medicine specialists that do further beyond training that I do, that take care of very high-risk patients. So we usually have to transfer those people to something like WVU, Capel Huntington, or CAMC. So, or other centers.
Would it be fair to say that in the progression of concern, that the highest risk for a situation that was defined as emergency would be at a home birth? That would be the greatest potential for loss of life. And then would it then proceed potentially to this birthing center, then to a hospital, and then to, I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, the potential there for complications is always there, every case. So could that turn bad fast and have a bad outcome? Sure. But your higher risk facilities are already going to be dealing with people that are high risk. So to answer your question, they still have a higher chance of mortality, morbidity, that type of thing. So it depends on the case you're looking. But low risk cases, sure, it could be either way.
I'd like to thank the gentleman for yielding. Permission to speak to the bill?
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I want to go about this in a little bit different angle, potentially. We certainly have had this argument for the 5 years that I've been here in an attempt to degrade and eliminate part or all of the CON. So let's talk about West Virginia and its aging, declining population, which is making it a challenge to sustain birthing centers. So I'm wondering why we're here talking about opening more today. West Virginia has some of the country's worst birthing outcomes, including its rate of infant deaths and preterm births, which can cause a number of serious complications, breathing and heart issues, to name just two. Putting up more birthing centers in our great state is not going to solve the root cause of the problem. Rather, the solution is in the problem itself. West Virginia having an improved educational experience, preventative medicine, and necessary youth social support. This is where our focus should be. Our state, sadly, is having an increased number of mothers dying of childbirth, which is, of course, you're not going to be surprised, connected to our drug epidemic. A problem which putting up more birthing centers will not solve. Birthing is an expensive service to provide. You need staff 24 hours a day, as alluded to by the gentleman. That is a 24/7, 365-day job. You are always on call. So imagine when a hospital sees low volume, what happens to them? They have to continue offering services with the decreased patients, which creates a financial struggle and challenges. Again, how will allowing exemption from the CON solve this problem? That's a question I pose to the body today. Could it be the challenges are more around medical malpractice rates, long hours, too little supporting staff in rural hospitals due to constant climbing costs? Or the fact that the West Virginia, our population continues to, unfortunately, to trend down. Let's fix the real problem here and stop playing games. The rate of preterm births in the U.S. has risen over the past 4 years, according to the CDC. And a new report card from the March of Dimes, a nonprofit organization that works to help mothers and babies in the United States, has given West Virginia a grade of what? F. That's primarily because of the number of premature births in this state. Nearly 12% of live births in West Virginia are premature, according to the March of Dimes. The earlier a baby is born, we all know this, the higher the risk of death and serious disability. So Interesting that you may want to know a piece of information that I learned from testimony here, or certainly from answering questions from the Vice Chair of Health, who stated that the only birthing center in the state of West Virginia currently is in Kanawha County. You might want to know the facts about this. The highest rate of premature births in this state is in Kanawha County. It's at 15%, according to the March of Dimes. I stand before you today because I oppose this bill. I have concerns about liability, quality of staffing. This bill would negatively impact my constituency as well as my local hospital. They have worked so hard there in that OB unit over the last year to get this unit to where they had an acceptable volume and that they were able to be profitable. So think about their margins, and they're working towards being successful, and they're trying to introduce a midwifery program. I support maintaining the current CON program to ensure hospitals are operating in a stable environment and services are not cherry-picked off, which would happen if we eliminate this CON. It's also interesting that the proponents believe if we eliminate this CON, we would see more opportunities, even potentially some changes if it was a complete repeal, which I understand that's not what this bill does. I want you to keep in mind that at the last census, we had enough staff in our state to take care of 2/3 of the hospital beds that we have available. I submit to you this is not a solution to the problem, but a step in the wrong direction. I would encourage you to vote no and oppose this bill.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from the 56th, Delegate Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't planning on talking about this bill today, but as one of the few people in this body that has had a baby, I think I have an interesting perspective. I also almost died in childbirth. I know a lot of you have talked to you about that story. I support this bill. I think it's a good bill. To my friend from the 80-something, 85th, I agree. We need to do a lot more to help maternal mortality. I have a bill, I would love for you to sign on to it, to address maternal mortality, and we know that maternal mortality does have some to do with the drug epidemic. It also has a lot to do with race, but I don't think we're ready to talk about that in this room, so it seems, because we've had these bills for years and they're not moving. So we absolutely need to work on maternal mortality, and I really hope that we can do that. To my friend who isn't in his chair right now from Greenbrier County, this is not what we asked for when you guys forced birth last summer. I have a big problem with getting up and talking about the cost of birth, because the real cost of birth is life and killing mothers. It's not how much it is on a piece of paper, it's that people are dying having birth, and health outcomes are incredibly important, and we need to address them. So I'm going to support the bill. I hope you'll join me.
The chair recognizes the gentlelady from the 19th, Delegate Kraus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my bill, and so I am standing in support of it. And as the gentlelady from Kanawha County, we're one of the few that have given birth, and I can tell you from the personal aspect of things, this is needed. Women have been giving birth for all of history. Yes, women. We've given birth. We've done it with and without the help of doctors, with and without the help of midwives. We've done it. We can continue to do it, and we will continue to do it. We just need some more access to facilities. We just told thousands of women throughout this state that they were going to have to give birth. Many of those are going to have to travel round trip hours to get to doctors or birthing facilities, and that is adding too much to them. We need to make these closer and allow them to come in where they're able to and able to sustain. I have a personal story with my child. I've had 5, so I'm very well versed in this. My fourth child, I dilated early. 3 weeks early, I was dilated at 5. He was on the cord. And if anybody knows anything about giving birth with each child, you tend to go a little bit earlier, a little bit faster. But I can tell you at 37 weeks, he really wasn't ready. But I had nothing closer to me than about an hour and 15-minute drive away. So I chose to be induced, which in turn upped my chances of complications. And I can definitely tell you after 3 previous births, it upped my pain level too. So because of this, like I said, he was 37 weeks when I had him. I had children at 42, 41, 40, 37 weeks induced, and then my 5th child came at 38 weeks. The other 4 were all natural births as far as going into labor and everything. And 2 of them without pain medication. And I can tell you by having to be induced, because I was so far away from a hospital, his was worse than all the other 4 put together. We need to give women choices, and we need to have more access available. So with that, I urge passage of this bill for all of us women who want to have this choice.
Lady from 73rd, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to speak in favor of the bill. I think that moms and people in general should have a right to choose where they get their health care. But in West Virginia, we, the government, make that decision. I was a neonatal ICU nurse for 10 years. Would I choose a birthing center? No, I personally wouldn't. I have seen every imaginable complication that there can have, that a child could have or a mom could have. And I had an emergency C-section myself at the very end because there was a knot in the cord. My daughter's heart rate was 30. She would have died, or she would have, been disabled from lack of oxygen to her brain. So I get all that. But moms have a right to choose where they want to have their babies. And our only option is the hospital or home. Birthing centers are a great alternative in between there, because what we saw during COVID was a huge increase in home births where no one's monitoring that baby unless you do get a nurse midwife to come to your home to provide monitoring. But our people deserve this freedom, and I think we should give it to them. I urge passage.
From the 84th, Dr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to speak for the bill. As you all know, I was a paramedic, and these hour-and-a-half rides that you're talking about, they can be 15 minutes away from a birthing center with a nurse practitioner or someone that has delivered numerous babies, or in the back of the truck with a paramedic like me that's scared to death, and we're still going, breathe, breathe. Now, the bill calls it thing. Well, and you're back there for an hour and a half. So this just gives them an option. I'd much rather for that lady to go to a midwife, which in Preston County we used to have a midwife, and she delivered 3/4 of Preston County. And if we give them the right, if there's complications, I would guarantee you that midwife would recognize it before Buck Jennings, the paramedic, would. And it's like Doc said, there is complications. They hemorrhage. You can't imagine whenever you see someone hemorrhage, they change colors. They go from a real glossy white to gray, and life is just leaving them. And you're telling the driver, go, get us there. And this just gives us another option. We live in West Virginia. We're the most rural state in the United States, and these are one of the things that we have to help. And I don't think that opening this up and getting rid of the CON for birthing centers is going to hurt the hospitals that much. And it'll certainly help the people of West Virginia, who we represent, not the hospitals. Thank you.
Number 13th, David Hackert.
I'd like to speak to the bill from a personal experience with a grandson, and we live in Parkersburg. My daughter went into early labor with my grandson. She sat 2.5 hours in a hallway at the hospital. They had to get her to Morgantown. She waited 2 hours. Let's think about Doddridge County, Ellenboro, Elizabeth, Ravenswood, Belleville. Belleville at its best is 30 minutes in a car. The 2 hours in any of them places, they could get somebody within minutes, half hour, to get help, to save the mother, save the baby, or make a decision that they got to go somewhere else. I urge passage of this bill because it's the right thing to do.
Number 60th, Dr. Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so, we spent a lot of time here. This was actually moving in the afternoon on this bill, but it's one of the more important votes I think we're going to take. And depending, and there's been good, compelling arguments on both sides of the issue. On one hand, as my colleague from Kanawha talked about, you know, this is something we talk about freedom and reducing regulation on a service that's important. And at the same time, we want to create access. And obviously, I think all of us, you know, create good health care access is important to us, especially here in West Virginia. Most of you know that during the last session, I helped support and champion the repeal of Certificate of Need that we attempted to do. However, I will say today that I have deep concerns, like my colleague here from Hardee County, about what this bill could do. On one hand, we may be thinking we're creating access to more people, but on the other hand, we could be damaging the hospital systems that provide the acute services, as my colleague from Mercer County alluded to just a moment ago. And as I mentioned last week, I served almost a decade on the board of directors with one of the local hospital systems here in Kanawha County. And I can tell you the OB and birthing center services that they offer, they lost money on it. They lose money. Most of the hospitals in the state, I don't know any that are making money delivering babies. And so they offer it, as he mentioned, as a service. They still have to staff those centers and those specialties regardless of what kind of babies, what kind of situations are coming in there, what the birth rate is. They've still got to have the expense of running that operation. And if something goes wrong at a birthing center, guess where that baby ends up? Right back at that hospital. And many times the outcome's not good. And that hospital gets sued. And somebody said, well, we're representing the people, not the hospitals. Well, guess what? The overwhelming majority of the hospitals in the state are nonprofit. They're run really basically by the community and put that money right back in there to provide a service, an acute service that's much needed. So when you look at, you know, why are the birthing centers or the OB specialties in these hospitals losing money? And a lot of times it was the situation, the type of payer mix that comes in there. Here we're the only state in the United States that's entirely lies within the Appalachian region. It makes us very unique. So somebody mentioned, you know, all the other states are doing this. Well, guess what? We're unique from those other states. We have a unique situation. Our payer mix, the type of mothers that are coming in, and the type of complications they have, the drug babies that we've seen over there at the hospital that come in, and the kind of care that they required was something that, you know, without that service, then, you know, who knows what could happen. We may end up with a lot more deaths. And so it is, you know, these hospitals, what's going to happen if the birthing centers are cherry picking off the better cases, the easier cases? And so what the hospitals are left with are the most acute cases and taken care of. Are they going to stay, as somebody mentioned, you know, that they were born at their regional hospital? I think they're Upshur County, and what a good job. And many of us come from areas where there are regional community hospitals that offer this service, and they do a good job. But what's going to, can they keep their doors open in this area, continue to offer this service if other services are allowed to come in and cherry pick off the better cases, and they continue to have to offer the complete round-the-clock service and the most acute, most expensive, and the most liable kind of cases that are going to get sued for. They're probably not going to continue to offer that service. So with that, we are actually reducing access, and especially in the most critical cases. So with that, I will be voting against the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman 16th, take it Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the Vice Chair, Health Yield. In the last, say, 5 years, do we know how many these birthing centers applied through CON been denied?
I do not recall. We did not have the West Virginia Health Care Authority come in to testify on that.
Do we know if they were in rural areas, or are they in, we don't have metropolitan areas, but around Charleston, Morgantown, Parkersburg?
To my understanding, there were a couple of places that there was some potential to open up, or there was some interest. I believe it was Martinsburg, down in the Fayette County, Nicholas County, Webster County area. There was some interest in one midwife opening, potentially a center, and then also, I think, Mon County, but there may be more. Those are just the ones that I'm personally aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Lady from 81st, take it Walker's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, have given birth. I, too, have lost a child. And I stand in opposition of this bill. I agree with the gentleman from the 85th. And from the gentleman from the 84th, I've never been glossy white, but I've definitely been gray. To my gentle lady friend from the 56 that brought up race, you are looking at an African-American woman who had several difficult births. And these birthing centers are for healthy pregnancies. But we must not turn a blind eye to what the pandemic taught us. Many West Virginians don't have a primary care physician. We always go to the specialist. So when you get that pregnancy test and it's positive, and to my friend from the 47th who speaks to us about being in the corner, we may have asked for things, but this was not one of them. Forced birth is very diverse. Pregnancy is very diverse. If you have never sat with a PCP and been with them for more than a year, you don't know if you may be a borderline diabetic. Your genetic makeup. West Virginia is the 7th worst state to have a baby. When you look at the people of color in the state, it is less than 4%. But when you look at maternal morbidity and the deaths of mothers and children, I have been fighting this issue since I've been here. It sickened me. Less than 3 months, we buried a baby and a mother due to complications to birth. This bill is not going to curve that we need more OBs in these rural communities. When we speak about freedom, we must understand the responsibility that comes with that. And I believe that's what the gentleman from the 85th was explaining to each and every one of us. Premature births. When we look at the beginning of time and studying gynecology, whether you like it or not, it was African American women that many of these experiments was used. Without any meds to stop the pain. And so there's a trust issue that goes into that generational trauma. When you become pregnant, gaining the trust of your OB. And to the lady from the 19th, you're absolutely right. We have given birth with midwives, doulas, but the comfort sits in the hospital, where I know that I would not only have an OB, but a cardiac physician there, a pulmonologist there. And these birthing centers won't have that. They can still apply. So why are we trying to take away the certificate of need? What are we solving with this particular piece of legislation? Access. How are we going to market this? Are you going to be open to patients? At what point will you refer them to an OB? You just said that we didn't have enough in the state. Will they take new patients at 5 months of pregnancy or 8? Well, the first time that this OB see this patient is going to be when the delegate from the 84th is bringing them in by ambulance without any history. I support the intent of the bill, but I see that we will have more deaths and maybe rise in the number of being the worst state to have babies. I will object this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman 38th, Delegate Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Years ago, back in 2016-17, my council reminded me that we brought up the certificate of need issue. That was probably one of the biggest heavy lifts that we did here to revise it over the years. And then that's what you have. And over the past several years, we've looked at trying to revise that and different parts chip away. And there's a lot of people that are on one side or the other on the certificate of need. And I'll just tell you, my bias is I don't like certificate of need. I like competition. I like people to have choice. Always have. Makes you work harder. Makes the hospitals work harder. Those are where I'd be leaning toward. Now, would it affect my practice? Sure. But I tell you, the key concerns to me are safety, access to care, cost, competition, and insurance, among some others. Access to care, rural areas. This bill would not change one way or the other if you're going to set up a birthing center in a rural area of the state. They could already do that, apply for certificate of need, probably not have much rejection of that. There probably would not be less dissent, so they could already do it. That leads to the competition part because, as I mentioned previously last week, the cost of running a business, you have the same economic factors in the urban areas as you do out in the rural areas. So you're going to have those centers set up in the urban areas right across from your hospitals. Now, it is choice. Some patients, women would like to go see certain people. They have different ways they'd like to deliver. They have different perceptions of how it'll go. I have no problem with that. Thing is, access to care. You're still going to have that access in the rural areas. They're going to have to travel a distance, or they're going to have home births. Now leads to complications because, back in the day, you always heard moms and babies didn't make it. We could go back to those days. I mean, hospitals aren't all that bad. Yes, there are a lot of things that go wrong with it, a lot of things we don't like about them. But maternal mortality has decreased over years last century because of the advances in medicine. But that doesn't mean you don't have sick people and you're not going to still have babies die, moms die. But access to care is a concern. One of the other things I would say, though, is with safety, you have a lot of lay midwives out there. They're not licensed. A couple of years ago, if I recall correctly, we did have to get a business license so we could kind of keep track of them. But they're not certified. They're not registered by OFAC. They don't have a medical license to do that. Those used to be the worst nightmares. When I did my residency training in Michigan, they have lay midwives, certified nurse midwives. Worst nightmares on a Friday, Saturday night was someone that a lay midwife come in, kid was a train wreck, mom was a train wreck. Those are things we see. So that's what you may start seeing in some of these hospitals. We get them already, but you may see more of that. But again, access to care is going to be, it's nice to have more centers, access to people. COVID, pandemic, revealed a lot of the shortcomings of the hospitals. My hospital right now, we have 4 obstetricians there. We don't have enough rooms to take care of all 4 of us, much less they're going to bring in a couple more. Makes it harder for us to do our business. So from a provider standpoint like me, I can do obstetric care, I could do surgical care. Our certificate of need prevents me from doing my own. If I tried to get a certificate of need for that in my locality in Mercer County Hospital, would fight that tooth and nail, it would never happen. I'd love to see the rest of those things on certificate of need go away. Really would. But I also see that there is a need for it. There are pros and cons both ways. The other thing would be competition. Yes, you could have low-risk stuff. The concern I have about the low risk is you have a certain population of women. I'm not an expert on women, but I've seen enough of them over the years, okay? There are a lot of them that have complications or problems in the past that want to deliver naturally without anything. You have that woman that had 3 or 4 C-sections before, wants to do a VBAC. That is not your low-risk case. But I'll guarantee you, they'll go seek out a midwife or a doula or someone else. And those are the nightmares I end up seeing. That leads to my insurance. Then I end up getting the bill for that. I have to cover $1 million, $3 million coverage to be at my hospital to practice. I can't practice on my own in my own community. I could do office stuff. I can't deliver any of those. I can't do the surgeries on them. I have to bring them to the hospital, and I'm at the mercy of the hospital. So they have a monopoly. I don't like monopolies. All right? I have no problem with competing. That is not a problem. Makes you work harder. It makes the hospitals work harder. They'll have to work harder to get your business, to get you to stay there. Instead of just saying, we have a monopoly, you just do what we want. You wait 8 hours in the emergency room. You don't have to get stuff up in labor and delivery. You don't have access to a room, you can't come in. Or you got to keep your family out during COVID or something like that. All right, those are things that are there, but you got to weigh those things. Insurance. I'll just tell you, my malpractice insurance is around $70,000 a year. I would guarantee nurse midwife doesn't have anything near that. Okay? Most of the hospitals where you have your maternal fetal people or the tertiary ones, a lot of those employed physicians already have their coverage already by the hospital. Okay? So those of us in private practice, we're up there at that point trying to do the same thing. So you're going to have that competition. You're going to lose a lot of your bread and butter. So that's one of the things you got to watch for. Do you want us in business or out of business? Again, I don't have a problem with competition. It's just when you start putting those in the urban areas, you're going to lose those services down the road. So that is a concern. And other than that, like I said, I can go either way on that. I am going to support this bill. I think I like competition. I like to have the opportunity. I would prefer to see them out in the urban areas. I don't think it's going to happen. But I do think they're going to set up in town. But that's a concern. But those emergencies are the key thing. That's when you do want that person that can respond. Now, I would love to start my own birthing center. I've got a bunch of midwives and a couple of other colleagues do that. The problem is, under the current certificate of need, I can't do the C-section. I can't take them to surgery. I can do things that some of the midwives wouldn't be able to do. I could do forceps, vacuums, things like that. I might be able to do different manipulations on complications. That's where the benefit would be, but I can't do the C-sections. So, you know, you have that complication, you've got to be able to do that. So, I will support it, but I do have reservations, but I do like competition. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'll support the bill.
Chairman 86, Second Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's hard to follow some folks that are so well versed and respected on these matters, and sometimes it's hard to get your hand around what is the most compelling arguments. And I would be for this bill were it not for the image that I keep coming up with. Some of the most compelling arguments from those who are advocating for this are the horror stories of a service being a half hour or an hour and a half away. And the best thing that I can, the image that comes to my mind is the cell phone coverage maps that everybody in here can close your eyes for a moment and you can see it. Now, if taking away this certificate of need would ensure that all of those blank spots would be filled in by the passage of this, you could convince me to support the bill. So we talk about my friends who have some libertarian leanings, as do I, are often, saying that, government is never the answer. In most cases, I would say yes, but I recall last year we entertained a bill in committee that dealt with certificate of need for a testing facility that tested marijuana and other things, and the arguments and testimony that we heard were of somebody who, based on the promise of certificate of need, this group, this family-owned business, invested significant amounts of money so that they could comply with what they were expected to do, only to have the rug being ripped out from underneath their feet because somebody decided to challenge the certificate of need, and then it kind of brings things into perspective. I'm probably average age, maybe a little bit older than the folks in here, but over the course of our lives, I've seen a growing animosity, or if somebody is successful, if somebody's profitable, that there seems to be a growing number of people who say, well, they can afford it, or they don't need that, or they have too much and we should have some of this. Think of those things when you consider this bill. I have my friend from the 60th, we had a long conversation, and I've spoke with my friend from the 84th. My friend from the 60th said most of what I had intended to say, and I appreciate that, and he's much more eloquent than I ever thought to be. These things it's easy to say this is going to help. Our good doctor in the house, laid out more facts that, and he's certainly forgot more than I'll ever know, but the frightening things are the what-ifs, and West Virginia having the high incidences of low birth weights or at-risk patients, and yet it's as a fellow paramedic, retired as my friend from the 84th, it's we learn a lot of stuff, and I've had the occasion, most of them didn't turn out favorable, sadly, but it leaves a big lump in your throat when I ask somebody, well, what happens if somebody goes because it's a little bit closer and it's staffed by something less than a surgical center with a doctor? Well, we'll just call an ambulance, and I'm thinking back to the roughly 10,000 ambulance calls that I've been on in my life, and some of the horrific memories that I've got, that everybody wants to be there to help, but when somebody's hemorrhaging, there's not a thing in the world that a paramedic or a team of paramedics or a team of midwives is going to be able to do effectively, other than to watch that potentially mother and child die. I don't like hyperbole. This is my third session. I've heard great arguments from all sides of any arguments, and sometimes there's always the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, and the stuff that's likely to happen is somewhere in the middle. I think everybody in here is thoughtful enough to think those things through, but the most compelling argument that the advocates for this present is the coverage and distance that you have to travel. Free market, there's not a soul. I take that back. There may be somebody who is just independently wealthy and wants to set up a charitable in the middle of that empty spot on the map where the cell coverage map is, or the how close are you to advanced care doctors for childbirth. They're not going to be set up in those blank spots. They're going to be set up on the periphery to sift off the ones that they know that they're going to pay, and then all of the hospitals that we have, will those that are already struggling sometimes with profitability, they've made the investments in the equipment and so forth, they're just going to get what is left. I don't see how this in any way is going to help the problem, and as my great friend from the 85th said, you know, this is more about the problems why West Virginia gets an F rating from the March of Dimes and any other organization. And I've done my best, and I'm sure each of you have tried to go and you know, pull up something, and not from Dr. Seuss, but from some you know, bona fide study from the CDC or elsewhere. I'm not the greatest speaker here. I think everybody understands, but think of that map. This is going to create more problems than it's going to solve, and I would urge a no vote.
Lady from the 49th, I'll call you to close debate on the bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've heard a lot of good arguments here on the floor today about this bill, both for it and against it. And so I'm going to keep my comments very brief and succinct. You know, correlation doesn't equal causation in research. I heard something from the gentleman from the 85th I'm going to address from the March of Dimes. So he is trying to correlate the fact that there's one birth center here in Kanawha County, there's more premature births. Well, that's because, as my friend from the 38th mentioned, you send patients to a tertiary care center to take care of those patients. So they have a level 4, level 5 NICU here in Charleston. Not everywhere has them. Actually, Morgantown and Charleston are the only two places, I believe. And I'm not sure what level Cabell Huntington has, but those are the only 3 places in the state that you're sending those patients. So you have to be very careful about trying to extrapolate data to meet your situation when it doesn't apply. I'm going to say that I live in Summersville. I live an hour from Beckley, an hour and a half from Clarksburg, an hour and a half to Charleston, and it's about an hour to an hour and a half to Lewisburg. We lost our OB center at our hospital about 2006, 2008. Those women drive a very long way to get the basic prenatal care. One of the risks that you have when you have nobody delivering in your community is they go without the prenatal care that they need. That potentially, if we had a birthing center that was staffed either by OBs or nurse midwives, that they could provide to those women. It makes those babies safer. What we did hear in testimony, not this year, but last year, from some of the midwives is that the certificate of need cost is so cost prohibitive that they can't even explore it. So, you know, one of those things, that's a concern. This is a great bill. I think that women deserve options. In the interest of full disclosure, I have never been pregnant or never delivered a baby, but I think women need some options in this state, especially our young women. Thank you.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 73 ayes, 26 nays, 1 member absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2789, removing birthing centers from certificate of need.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill take effect from its passage.
Lady from 71st moves that the bill take effect from passage. Those in favor of that motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 84 ayes, 14 nays, 2 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next, bill on 3rd reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3055 to create a vocational math class for students interested in careers in the trades.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman 38th, Doug Ellington to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill calls for restructuring a current math course, the technical transition math for secondary students in the career and technical pathway. The intent is to better prepare them for jobs in the skilled trades. The curriculum is to include the fields of fractions, conversion from fractions to decimals, application of measurement, reading blueprints, geometry pertaining to workforce math and other math skills, needed to succeed in the trades. An instructor must meet the same qualifications as needed to teach current trade classes in the public schools. The class can be taken as a personalized math credit to meet graduation requirements. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Chairman 52nd, Docket Rowe is recognized.
A question, sir. Is this a mandatory math requirement or is it volunteer?
It's voluntary, but it can substitute for a required math requirement.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 65th, Docket Martin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
So is this class like a one-year class? Is it a half-year class?
I believe it's full year, full unit, yes.
Does it specify that in the bill?
The transitional math is a full year in the code.
I see.
So it's reinforcing that and just making it better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there debate on the bill? If not, the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3055 to create a vocational math class for students interested in careers in the trades.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are the bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 241 relating to Patient Brokering Act.
Are there amendments?
The Committee on Health and Human Resources moves to amend the bill on page 2, line 27, by striking subsection C in its entirety and inserting a new subsection C to read as follows. C, the Office of the Inspector General shall develop a tool that facilitates the submission of complaints. The Office of the Inspector General shall investigate complaints and enforce the provisions of this article.
The question is on the amendment just read by the clerk. Lady with 73rd, Douglas Summers, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a little background if you're not familiar with patient brokering. This act was passed in 2020, and patient brokering is a practice used by some rehabilitation facilities to pay a third party to procure patients for them. The language was placed in Chapter 16, which relates to public health, but no specific authority was given to a state agency to investigate and enforce those provisions. So this year we came back and we provided authority for a state entity to investigate if patient brokering is going on. When the Senate sent us the bill, they sent it to be under OFLAC, which is the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certification. The House Health Committee changed that to be under the Office of Inspector General, which has a broader purview. Some of these places are not just healthcare facilities. OFLAC sits underneath of the OIG, so it's in the same area, but like I said, it's the organization that has a broader purview. I urge adoption.
Gentleman second, Douglas Teslo.
My light's on in error. I apologize.
Okay, the question again is, shall the amendment be adopted? Is there debate on the amendment? If not, the question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Are there other bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2845 relating to removing expired provisions from the code.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3077 relating to making the use of the multi-state real-time tracking system permanent.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3164 to extend the termination date of the West Virginia Advisory Council on Rare Diseases due to a delay in beginning its duties.
Bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3191 relating to certain facilities operated by the state government to obtain a license.
The bill to be advanced. Other bills on first reading. Leaves of absence. Late item 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleague, Delegate Smith.
Are there objections to the leave of absence being granted? No objections heard. That leave of absence will be granted. Introductions. Introductions. Gentleman 98, Delegate Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my Jefferson County colleagues, Delegates Hardy, Ridenauer, and Clark, very pleased to introduce representatives of the Jefferson High School basketball team that are down here participating in the Parmar Store Shootout over at West Virginia State University. I believe they're in the South Gallery behind me. If they would please stand, will the House please make them welcome?
Gentleman 25th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Cabell County, I would like to introduce a guest today in the West Gallery. With us, we have the Chief Tax Deputy of Cabell County, Ms. Samantha Childers. Please, House, make her feel welcome.
Gentleman 74th, Delegate DeVault.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates of Marion County, I would like to recognize in the South Gallery, if she's still here, the County Clerk of Marion County, Miss Julie Kincaid. Please make her feel welcome. Thank you.
Gentleman 9th, Delegate Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon. Joining us today in the South Gallery, we have several good friends of mine from Ritchie County, some county officials. We've got Ritchie County Commissioner Randall Riggs, Ritchie County Commissioner Steve Witter, and also Ritchie County Sheriff Mr. Terry Snodgrass. I would ask that they stand and the House make them feel welcome.
Gentleman the 14th, Delegate Foggin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Wood County, I'd like to introduce in the West Gallery, maybe, our Wood County Clerk, former police officer, friend of mine, Joe Gonzalez, if he would stand and be recognized.
Gentleman from the 80th, Delegate Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, we're joined with some friends of mine from Montague County. Our Chief Tax Deputy, Kelly Palmer, if she would please stand. And she's with another good friend from the tax office, Kyle Cunningham. If she would please stand, if the House would give them a warm welcome.
Introductions. Miscellaneous business. Lady 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Are there announcements? Lady 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Rules Committee will meet tomorrow behind the chamber at 10:45.
Gentleman 97, Delegate Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February the 8th at 1 p.m. in the Finance Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from 51st, Delegate Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February 8th at 1 p.m. in the committee room. The agenda is posted. The Republican members will caucus in the chairman's office at 12:45 p.m.
Gentleman from the 91st, Delegate Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow, February 8th at 9:15 in the Judicial Conference Room. The Republican members will caucus at 9 o'clock. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from the 1st, Delegate McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. Committee members, Republican members, will caucus in the chair's office at 2:45.
Gentleman 43rd, Delegate Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February the 8th at 2 p.m. in the House Education Committee room. The agenda will be posted. Also, Republican members will caucus in the chairman's office at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 88th, Doug Hillenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Veterans Caucus will meet out of cycle today at 4 p.m. at room M410.
Gentleman from the 72nd, Doug Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Volunteer Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services will meet at 9:15 Wednesday morning in the House Finance Committee room. Republicans will caucus at 9 o'clock. Please bring your computer, and the agenda has been posted.
Gentleman from the 21st, Doug Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet today at 1:30. That is 30 minutes past our scheduled time, 1:30 in the House Education Committee room. Republican members will caucus at 1:15.
Gentleman from the 99th, Doug Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Economic Development and Tourism will meet at 2:30. Republicans will caucus at 2:15 in the House Finance Committee room. Also, your new Energy Caucus will meet tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Gov.org. Lunch will be provided. EDF Renewables and Charlotte Lane will be doing presentations.
Gentleman from the 2nd, Douglas Teslo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet today, February 7th at 1:30 in the Judiciary Meeting Room, and the Republicans will caucus at 1:15. Same room.
Gentleman from the 16th, Doug Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Judiciary Subcommittee on House Bill 2605 will meet today at 3 o'clock in the Judiciary Committee room or after energy is finished. Those members, myself, the delegate from the 2nd, Delegate Teslo, and the delegate from the 76th, Delegate Garcia. 3 o'clock or after energy is finished.
Gentleman from the 60th, Doug Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The subcommittee on the Committee for Economic Development will meet today immediately following the main committee meeting, which was scheduled to start at 2:30. So that will be immediately after that committee meeting in the House Finance Committee room.
Lady from 49th, Doug Tully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet today, 3 p.m. in the East Wing Committee room. The agenda has been posted. Republican members will caucus at 2:30 in the chair's office, and please bring your laptops. Thank you.
Gentleman from 47, Doug Longenegger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February the 8th at 9 a.m. in the East Wing Committee room. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 25th, Doug Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All Democrats will caucus immediately following floor session in the Carter Conference Room.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question is on the motion that the House stand adjourned until 11 o'clock tomorrow. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the motion adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.